Red One star Chris Evans revealed recently that he tries not to think about whether or not the movies he makes will stand the test of time. Now, having seen Red One for myself, my only response to that would be, we can tell, Chris, we can tell. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
Come on. Do it. Do it!
Now what you're going to see here is why the hierarchy of power is about to change.
When a villain kidnaps Santa Claus from the North Pole, an elf, aka extremely large and formidable, operative joins forces with the world's most accomplished tracker to find him and save Christmas. The first thing I did when researching this movie was Google whether or not The Rock had already been in a movie called Red One, because I felt like he was. Turns out he actually did a movie called Red Notice on Netflix that came and went just as fast as this movie will. The funny thing about that is, even though both of these movies have completely different premises, if you switch the names, no one would know the difference. And I do think that is a perfect representation of The Rock's acting career overall thus far.
That makes sense.
I think if you go all the way back to one of his early films, The Rundown, a movie that had a brief cameo from Arnold Schwarzenegger, a scene that was basically intended to be a symbolic passing of the torch moment. Because from that moment on, The Rock was crowned the next great action star. The only problem was, after that, he started calling himself Dwayne, and he started taking on the absolute worst roles imaginable. I mean, there is a literal running joke on the internet that he plays the same character in every single movie that he is in, over and over again. In fairness, I do feel like a movie like Red One would have been something that Arnold Schwarzenegger did late in his career when he was significantly less famous. The difference is Arnold would have already had The Terminator, Predator, and a slew of other action classics under his belt.
Yeah! Stick around.
To this day, I still feel like The Rock has yet to have that signature role that his acting career will be remembered for. I mean, the closest thing that he's had to that is Hobbs from the Fast and Furious movies, so that should tell you something. Bottom line, I think The Rock, his production company, and his agent completely dropped the ball on his action star career. As far as Red One goes, it's pretty much more of the same from The Rock, only this time it takes place during Christmas. The Rock basically plays Santa Claus's head of security, who is losing faith in the spirit of Christmas because everyone is being a dick to each other. And The Rock basically plays this role straight. And I get it, it's kind of the character he always plays, no-nonsense tough guy. But it was really kind of difficult to buy into it this time around when he's doing it in a somewhat ridiculous movie. In fact, a lot of the actors kind of play it this way, more serious, and it made it kind of difficult to figure out whether or not this movie was intended to be a comedy, an action movie, or a straight-up drama.
I don't get it.
I guess you could say in that aspect, tonally, this movie is all over the place. It's clearly intended to be a family movie, a crowd pleaser, but there are a handful of moments that feel like it's trying to appeal to an older crowd. The only actor that seems to be in on the joke and is playing it all up for laughs is Chris Evans. And I use the term laughs very loosely, because I'd be lying to you if I said I even chuckled at any of the comedy in this movie. It's that kind of obnoxious modern comedy where they think a character reacting to a ridiculous situation by trying to comedically explain it is going to be entertaining.
Haven't you ever heard of the healing power of laughter?
And Chris Evans is very much the vessel for that kind of humor, being the outsider in this situation. And you can't help but feel like Chris Evans is another one of those actors that really hasn't lived up to the hype post-MCU. Again, it kind of feels like another Rock or even Chris Hemsworth situation where Chris Evans isn't really picking the best roles. On the flip side to that, I do feel like Chris Evans's character was one of the few minor bright spots of this movie, because his character is the only one who legitimately has some form of a story arc. He even had a couple of heartfelt moments that made me feel like, okay, at least they are trying just a little bit with this character. One of the things that I did think was interesting about this movie that could have been more interesting if it wasn't surrounded by a whole lot of nothing is the way that the film kind of toys with the mythology of Christmas, Santa Claus, and other mythological beings. And they do it in a way that does make this world feel unique compared to other movies like it.
I would rather watch an R-rated animated Christmas comedy with a touch of a feminist agenda.
Now that's not to say there isn't a ton of cringe and cliche things going on as well. So in the end, Red One does feel like a bit of a missed opportunity in that aspect. The villain of this movie, I think, can only be compared to something that is akin to a Power Rangers villain. Now don't get me wrong, as a kid I loved the Power Rangers just as much as the next person. But in 2024, to have a villain that looks and feels this cheap, this cheesy, is not a good look at all. Speaking of the look and feel of the movie, if you take that into consideration, I'm absolutely shocked that this isn't a direct-to-streaming movie. I mean, it literally has all the makings of one. Low-quality visuals, and a bunch of big-name actors who are pretty much just going through the motions and collecting a paycheck.
Show me the money.
It's just mostly forgettable in almost every way. It absolutely could have been one of those Netflix movies that people talk about for a week because it was convenient to watch, and then they never talk about it again. The Rock actually said that recently he went to see Oppenheimer in IMAX, and he thought to himself, and I quote, "Holy shit, Red One, on this screen, with this technology, it's going to be game over."
Man, game over, man. It's game over.
Oh, it might be game over, alright, because as it stands right now, this film is on track to flop spectacularly. At least we have Christopher Nolan and Oppenheimer to thank, apparently, for inspiring The Rock to release Red One theatrically. Bottom line, Red One is another Rock vehicle in a long line of Rock vehicles that does absolutely nothing to build on the legacy of his acting career. I'm starting to think that maybe it's time that he just goes back to pro wrestling permanently. I'm not really sure. But Red One was a mostly uninspired experience that made me feel next to nothing, and that's why I'm going to be giving it the Careless Sam Gerard.
I don't care. Y'all be cool. Right on.